What's wrong with CPE today?
Well, what's wrong with CPE today is we've got an antiquated kind of system, regulatory delivery system, statutory system, delivery model. It's all antiquated. If we don't do something to recognize what's going on in terms of learning trends and methodologies, pedagogy, and observe maybe what's going on in public schools and in colleges, those people in college will be in this profession in 5 years or less. And to tell them that they've got to go to a classroom at some facility and sit down for 8 hours in front of a talking head in order to maintain or enhance their competency, they're going to, I think, flatly reject that. They're going to look for alternatives. They may thumb their nose at the system and say, I'm going to learn what I got to learn, and I don't care about this CPE, and hopefully I won't get caught, but I will improve my skills. And, one thing, we talk a lot about generational issues, and we've done a lot of work here in Indiana on generational stuff. It's very important to the millennials and the Xers and the generation coming behind them to continually learn. They know, because of the world they're growing up in, that things change quickly, and as a result, you must continually improve. So if they're not getting that in our current structure, they're going to find other ways to learn, because they know they've got to learn to be successful. And learning to maintain your certificate is going to become secondary, I think.
What opportunities does technology present in changing the way CPE is delivered, in the way it's consumed, in the way accountants practice?
Well, I think as a profession, we've got a lot to learn in that regard. We can look at some examples. We can look at the Florida Virtual School, which was really the first online school. This is K through 12, no bricks and no mortar. It's all email, online video, texting, phone calls. Had an opportunity to talk to a teacher in the Florida Virtual School, and I said, here's my concern. I said, having been a teacher many years ago, what kind of relationship do you have with your students? And I was quite frankly shocked by his response. He said, well, I have a better relationship now than I did when I was in a brick and mortar school. Of course, I said, well, how is that? And he said, because since it's virtual, he said, I have a one-on-one relationship with each of my students. When I was in a brick and mortar building, or if I'm in a CPE classroom and someone is sitting in the back and they're not paying attention and they're not getting it, I can simply ignore that individual. In the virtual environment where I've got a one-on-one relationship, if you will, a one-on-one contract with all of the participants, he said, I've got a better relationship now than I did. And I think, if you look at the complexity of the practice of accounting today, whether you be in a large public accounting firm, a big four, a sole proprietor in industry, sometimes you need that personal attention. And we all know that, sometimes when you're in a larger group setting, you're afraid to ask the question because you're afraid you might look stupid. So I think technology is part of the answer. I don't think, Rick, that the need for seminars and conferences will ever go away totally. There are some subject matters. How about communication skills? You probably need to be in a group setting to improve that skill set. So I think there'll always be a need, but we really need to think about how we can change the regulatory environment and the delivery mechanisms to be more responsive to the rate of change and the complexity in today's environment, and deliver knowledge and competency development when people need it, as opposed to asking them to sign up for a course 3 or 4 months from now. That might work for a staff accountant, but it's not going to work for somebody, I'd say, beyond three to 5 years in the profession. They know what they need to know now when they're working on a particular project.
What could or should the profession be doing about it that it's not doing now?
We're not talking about it. We're talking about how to sell more CPE that we're selling today. And in some cases, we're talking about how do we move what we're selling in a classroom in a seminar format, how do we move that onto online? And I don't think that's the right answer. I think we got to talk about, is the regulatory structure appropriate in today's environment? are the CPE requirements, like the, various states have A&A or ethics or tax and various amount. Is that still appropriate when you consider the degree of specialization? There's a trend out there. You can read it. It's being written about a lot. You don't see it in many publications, but hyper specialization is upon us. Look at the medical profession. That analogy has been made for years and years. It's coming to accounting. I talked to a partner, an engagement partner in a Big Four firm yesterday, and he said, when I go meet with my client as the engagement partner, he said, I have no less than 7 or 8 specialists sitting in the room. And that's what's going on. And I'm not so sure that the current CPE regulatory structure recognizes specialization and, quite frankly, the need for our members to specialize because of increasing complexity.
What will happen if the CPE system doesn't change?
I think our members will, in order to serve clients, manage their risks, be successful in corporate America, will find ways to learn. Now, many will continue to try and comply with the CPE requirements. I don't want to say there's going to be an uprising. That's not the nature of certified public accountants. But sooner or later, I think people, and especially younger people coming into the profession, are going to say enough is enough. This has got to change. And you, the profession, and by that I mean the Institute, the AICPA, and state societies, are not being responsive to what I need in terms of how I learn and what I learn and when I learn. They'll go someplace else and find it. And I think there are people out there who specialize in continuing education for a number of professions and occupations who will smell it and say, hey, there's a market we can go get, because state societies, AICPA, not being responsive. Now,
where do we start? Where do we start?
AICPA meetings, task forces. We got to engage state boards of accountancy. People are afraid from one, I think, one perspective, and that is we've got this measurement system of hours. If we go to things like independent study, online learning, allowing research to count, how do we measure that? And I get that question now because I talk to a lot of people here in Indiana, and I've talked to some of my colleagues around the country about the need to change. And the question I always get is, how do we measure that? Well, I don't have the answer, but we need to talk about alternative ways to assess competency and develop competency. Is it a testing system? That scares the heck out of a lot of people. So I don't know. It could be. Is it some kind of a checklist that's developed for people who are in a particular, you're in a manufacturing company, $20 to $50 million of revenue, you're the CFO, it's privately owned. Here's a checklist of competencies that you ought to have, in this 2 or 3 year period. It's a different approach. People say, well, it's too much work, but if you're abandoning the work we do now, or at least some of it, to pursue alternatives that truly respond to the need to develop competencies, I think it's going to balance out. And by the way, I think there are a lot of folks in my position around the country, state CPA societies, who say, hey, we make a lot of money. Well, we don't make a lot of money. There's a lot of revenue, but there's also a lot of expense. I think we can create value in new ways if we engage vigorously in discussions about what needs to change about continuing education, competency assessment, and competency development for members of the accounting profession as we move farther into the 21st century.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think you said it all.
Did I?
Yeah.
Thank you for calling.